Hi everybody, this is Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. Welcome to the channel. I thought it would be a good time for a Friday Reads update. Friday, May 17th, 2024. Here's what I have been up to in the last week or two. I actually finished a few books this week. So the first one is the Steve Martin book, Shopgirl. It's a novella. I found it in the little free library, and I have since finished it and returned it to a little free library. Wonderful little book. I really enjoyed this book by Steve Martin. It was a great character study, and it's this young woman who's out of college, and she's working in a department store in Beverly Hills behind the glove counter, and she's sort of bored, and people watches, and then a rich gentleman she has a little bit of an awkward relationship with a guy who's around her age, and that doesn't really go anywhere, and he's a bit of a schlub. And then she gets involved with this older gentleman who takes interest in her, and he's rich, and he's wines and dines her and takes her out, and they have an affair. He's divorced, and so it's just kind of a gentle story about the arc of that affair, and how she gets a little bit upset when he tells her that he wants to date other women, and so there's some ups and downs, but it's sort of, the book takes you through the other side of that relationship, and there's some interesting twists at the end, and there's some nice sense of humor in the book, and it has a kind of autumnal quality, I would call it. It seems like a work of maturity written by someone in middle age who's been around the block a few times, and has had some loves in his life, and but it's a good focalized story through her eyes, told in the third person. But I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's a gentle story. Like, nothing really horrible happens. You do get a peek into Mirabelle's family life. Her family lives back in Vermont, and so they kind of come in later in the book, and it's interesting. Like, the story feels like it reaches a sense of conclusion, completion. I don't want to spoil the ending for people, but it's nothing like super dramatic. It's just a nice, gentle story about how people can kind of carry you from one phase of your life into another phase of your life. So I recommend it. It would be a good library borrow if your library has it, but I'm sure it wouldn't cost you much used, or it's probably still in print for all I know. It's a book I didn't really know much about. I just happened to come across it in a little free library, and I really enjoyed it. I did like Steve Martin's prose style. Like, there's just, at the sentence level, it just seemed very, like, really good character studies of people, a good eye for detail. Some of the descriptions of, like, sex and love were very explicit, but not pornographic or anything like that. It was just frank and direct and honest. There was a lot of honesty in that book. Is it great literature? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But it was a good read. I liked it. I was happily surprised by how good it was. That's Shopgirl by Steve Martin. The other book I finished was this one, Ape and Essence by Aldous Huxley. This has been sitting on my Kobo reader for a long time, and I've been in and out of it. And in my nighttime reading, I finally got around to sort of plowing through the rest of it. It's not a long book really at all. I don't know what, like, the real page count of it is, but it's not a long book. And it's a strange book. I do like Aldous Huxley. I've read Brave New World, obviously, Brave New World Revisited, an early novel of his called Chrome Yellow, and a book on religion that he wrote called The Perennial Philosophy, which in my opinion is one of the best books about religion that I've ever read. And then The Devils of Loudon, which is sort of a creative nonfiction novel hybrid thing. That was really, really impressive. He's a very intelligent man, like very smart, full of ideas. And Ape in Essence is, I don't know quite what to call it. It's sort of like an apocalyptic type novel, like an apocalyptic vision. But there's like this frame story around it, set out in like Hollywood, West Coast, Los Angeles area. And then inside this frame of the story, there's basically, it's like a film script or like a premise for a film. And that's really the bulk of the story, which is just bizarre. Like there's just all kinds of crazy stuff that happens. I kept thinking of Devo, like De-Evolution, you know the band Devo? Like this is a tale about sort of what could happen in the future thanks to nuclear war and environmental degradation and the whole like apocalyptic train of disasters that could befall us, how we might revert, become very tribal people. With this, it's almost like psychedelic, some of the stuff that's going on in there, and it's kind of like, it has a feeling like he dashed this book off pretty quickly. So, you know, I wouldn't say it's probably one of his greater novels. Haven't read enough of his novels to make an opinion on that, but, you know, you go to Aldous Huxley for the ideas and for like the interesting speculations about things. And, you know, it was worth a read, but it's sort of a roller coaster ride of a book. Like I didn't know quite what to think of it at the end. So that's Ape in Essence. And then the big thing I completed was this tome, John Irving, The Last Chairlift, all 900 some odd pages of it. This is a heavy lift. The Last Chairlift, I guess you could call me a John Irving fan. Like I've read several of his novels, and I have almost all of his books on the shelves. Hope to get around to them all someday. Of the John Irvings that I have read, my favorites were The World According to Garp and A Prayer for Owen Meany. This book, if you're a John Irving fan, it's got all the familiar tropes. The search for a father, lots of strange cast of characters, a motley crew, sexual escapades, sexual politics. It's basically a really long, multi-decade family saga, and the protagonist is Adam, and he's a writer, and he is the product of a one-night stand that occurred in Aspen, Colorado. His mother was a skier and became a ski instructor, and she had a little dalliance with a 14-year-old who ended up becoming a movie star. And it's really hard to summarize this book because so much goes on in it, but it's basically a family saga, a family chronicle. Everyone in the family is in some way queer, and Adam is sort of the strange one in the bunch because he's really the only heterosexual character in the family. The mother marries an English teacher at Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, and that English teacher, Mr. Barlow, turns out to be trans, switches genders, and the mom is a lesbian, and she has her partner is a trail groomer on the ski slopes, and the mom's the ski instructor. And then there's, you know, other family members, cousins, and the cousin's significant other, who is a mute lesbian by choice, and who becomes a writer. And then there's lots of subplots in this and extended family members. It's basically life and death. There's a lot of characters who die tragically, who die of their own volition. There's just so much going on in the book. I don't want to give a whole lot of it away. But what do you say about John Irving? I thought this book was an improvement over Avenue of Mysteries, which when I was reading Avenue of Mysteries, I really didn't like it much at all. I thought it was very long-winded. He could have edited out 250 pages and not really suffered too much. Probably those cuts would have benefited the book. But in this strange way, the book stuck with me, some of the characters in it, and I continue to think about the book. And I have a similar reaction to this. And if you read the reviews on The Last Chairlift, a lot of people will complain about the length. It is a very baggy novel, and he has a strange way of telling a story. It's really loose, and it's kind of convoluted, and he's a yarn spinner, John Irving. He sort of one tale leads to another, and they kind of interweave with one another, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's very, very artlessly told. You're just kind of, things are matter of fact, and as you're reading it, sometimes you think, this doesn't really feel very literary at all, and where is this going? And it's just kind of plods along, and a lot of people would lose patience with that. I didn't find that this book was quite as tedious as Avenue of Mysteries was, because, well, I'm not sure why, but I really did take a lot of interest in the characters and what happened to them as they moved through the decades. Thematically, the book seems to be about freedom, about sexual freedom, and also about tolerance and intolerance in the context as you move through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. There's a lot in here about the AIDS crisis in the 80s and the lack of political will at the time to do things about it. It's about where our country headed in the decades going from Obama into Trump. And it's also about that search for the father. Interestingly, format-wise, the writer, Adam, in the book, he includes a couple screenplays that advance the plot. So you have a sort of a switch of genres in the midst of the book. And I did think that the book reached a climax that felt a little bit contrived to me. I don't want to spoil it for anyone. I'm not sure why things happened the way they did happen, but it was definitely a climax. And then the last 150 pages of the book felt like denouement and sort of the chips falling, and it felt a little bit like he was rushing to get to the end, and some of those parts, although you're also, as a reader, you're ready to finish this long novel, I felt like he sped through that part a little bit too much. I wanted to see a little bit more in that portion of the book. It's a kind of book, though, where the characters stick with you, and that's, I think, his strength as a writer, and in terms of his literary qualities. Sometimes just as a stylist, he's pretty flat, but in terms of his characterizations and the kind of zany sort of oddball things that people do and what happens to them, those things you really do remember and they stick with you. And I was, in some sense, sorry to finish the book because you've kind of been living with these characters for so long. And I really did enjoy it on the whole. There's a lot in here about skiing, which was interesting to me. There was a lot earlier in the book about wrestling. Some of these are just familiar John Irving territory. and it reminded me of like a little bit of World According to Garp. You know, there was definite echoes of that here. But you know, I would say if you like John Irving, you're probably going to like this book. If you're not a John Irving reader yet, this is probably not a good place to start. Um, Start with Owen Meany is probably the safest book to start with to get the flavor of what John Irving does. But anyway, I'm really happy to finish it because it was very long. I did enjoy it. I'm going to just remember reading this in the winter time, and you know, it was good stuff. So very much a story about. Oh, the big thing I left out about it was ghosts. There's ghosts. It's a ghost story, so there's tons of ghosts laced throughout the whole book, and I think it's partly a book about how people come and go out of our lives, and you know, the memories that they bring to us, and how they sort of continue to haunt our lives, even though they're not there anymore. That definitely seemed to be a theme in the book, and also it was a plea for toleration. You know, that seemed to be a strong theme as well. Like, these people, even though they are by sort of normative standards not normal, they love each other, they care for each other, they stick by each other throughout the decades, and that sort of family loyalty, like, is really admirable. And yet some people would just think these are a band of weirdos who should all be like shoveled off the planet. And you know, it's interesting what John Irving has to say about that. But you go to a John Irving novel for the characters. I think that's primarily the strength of it. So anyway, the book reading continues. I'm at this point in the year where, with the school year being done, I can start to catch up on my reading. Usually May, June, July are peak reading months for me. Now with my career change, I think that's probably going to continue into the fall as well. Let's hope so, because I feel a little behind in my reading pace, but I'm getting there. So anyway, that sums up this week in reading. Let me know what you've been up to reading-wise, or if you have any reactions to these books. Ape in Essence by Aldous Huxley, Shopgirl by Steve Martin, and The Last Chairlift by John Irving, this heavy thing. I'm going to keep it though. This is a good one. Enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again real soon. Bye.